add any last minute amendments to share with the judges. But since that's not the case, I'll go dark as well. And yeah, I will just be in the background.
Okay, fantastic. Just because my internet connection's been a bit erratic, normally I'd keep it on throughout the whole moot, but I'm just going to comment when your time notifications are.
I mean, that's quite useful anyway, because then people will notice you more, overtly than normally.
Yes, yeah. So just so you guys are aware, it'll be 7 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, and then 1 minute. I'm not going to do 10 minutes, just to,
Good. I 7 minutes is unnecessary myself, but there you go.
Okay,
sure, no,
fantastic. Okay. Just for anyone watching on YouTube, so this is firstly thank you for tuning in. This is the DMH Stallard Sussex Senior Moot, which will be streaming, and it will be available to watch afterwards, uploaded on the Sussex Mooting channel. We're just waiting for the judges to come in. These are the 4 mooters who've reached the final, who've done amazingly. So we have Marco and Ryan as the appellants, and Sarah and Archie as the respondents. And there'll be a cross appeal, so 4 lots of 20 minutes and then 3 lots of 3 minutes. It should be pretty explanatory.
Just 2 lots of 3 minutes.
2 lots of 3 minutes.
So the cross appellant will respond, and the appellant will respond, and then the cross appellant will respond.
That makes more sense. Well, thank you very much. So I'm going to go dark now. Wait for the judges to come in. Good luck, guys, and enjoy it.
And can I just remind you, it's appellant, respondent, cross appellant, and then appellant, respondent, appellant in reply, cross appellant, cross respondent, cross appellant in reply. That's the order, yeah?
So in the order of times, is that 2023?
23, yeah, 2023, 2023.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Craig.
Okay, everybody clear? Okay, good.
Sorry, Tristan, just checking. Are the judges able to leave the breakout room, or can you admit them from the breakout room into the main call?
I'll bring them back now.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Hello?
Hello. We can hear you.
David, you're muted, David.
Thank you.
Right. You've muted again. No. We had this call night 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Are we all there?
I think we are.
Some of you seem to be muted.
I think we'll stay muted until we speak, my lord.
I think so. So we want Mr. Abu Sulaiman to be not muted in order to kick off.
Open his case.
And we're sticking with the dates exactly as they're drafted. All right. Okay, so you've got your 20 minutes, Mr. Abu Sulaiman, to present to us the appeal of Cameron against the decision of the Court of Appeal. So off you go.
Thank you, my lord. My name is Mr. Abu Sulaiman, as already said, and I appear on behalf of the appellant. My learned opposite, Mr. Arundel, appears on behalf of the respondent. And in regard to the cross appeal, Mr. Bala appears on behalf of the cross appellant, and Mr. Tarascus appears on behalf of the cross respondent.
Okay.
Would your lordships like a summary of the facts, or are you already familiar with the
No,
case?
we're both familiar with them. Thank you.
I
Thank you
think
very
we're
much,
well
my
up
lord.
on the facts. Thank you.
Just before beginning on my submissions, I thought it was worthwhile just to make sure the elements of the law are crystal clear here, and that there are two stages. One is that Ms. Delgado must prove that she's acquired a beneficial interest in the property. And the second stage is that if she has acquired one, what is the proportion or the quantification of this beneficial interest?
Right.
The appeal concerns this first stage, and the ground of appeal is that given Mr. Tucker is the sole legal owner of the property, Ms. Delgado could have only acquired a beneficial interest in the property by an express agreement between her and Mr. Tucker, or by contributing to the purchase price of the property. I will just highlight that my second and third submissions do not rely on my first submission being accepted by the court. I would also think it beneficial to highlight to the court that on first glance, it appears that my learned opposite skeleton focuses only on counter-arguing my first submission. Therefore, the consequence of this is, even if you do accept all three submissions of my learned opposite and reject my first submission, unless in oral argument anything comes up to reject my to counter-argue my second and third submission, it is respectfully asked that you allow the appeal.
All right. I hear what you say. Okay.
I'll just also like to emphasize that the consequence of the decision of the Court of Appeal is that Mr. Tucker has been left to pay the £50,000 for the office of Ms. Delgado. It seems quite, I will of course be going into authority after this, but as an underpinning argument, it's submitted that it cannot be just that Ms. Delgado pays for the office, spends £50,000 one day on an office for herself, and then the next day, Mr. Tucker is the one who's expected to pay for that office. To just put the...
Well, the justification for it would be that it's increased the value of the property.
Well, it has increased the value of the property, but I mean, multiple acts are capable of increasing the value of the property of a house. For instance, even doing housework in a house ensures that it doesn't become run down, doesn't become dirty, derelict, doesn't become infested with vermin. But the authority has consistently held that actions such as these, even though they may result in an increase in the value of the house, they are not sufficient to create a beneficial interest in the property. And furthermore, regarding the authorities, the important thing is to see what the common intention of the parties were, my lord. Thank you for your question. Now, to begin with my first submission, this is that in sole name cases, Lloyds Bank and Rossett remains the leading authority in relation to the first stage acquisition of beneficial interests. Lloyds Bank and Rossett was reported in the first volume of the 1991 appeal case reports at page 107. Please may I dispose of formal citations?
Yeah,
henceforth?
you can all dispense with formal citations.
Thank you, my
And
lords.
I'll do the same when I give a short judgment at the end as well.
Thank you, my lords. But for my first authority, I would like to refer to Thompson and Humphrey. This is on page 13 of the bundle and should be highlighted, and the relevant paragraph highlighted in light blue.
Yep.
What this extract will show you is that the Supreme Court decisions of Stack and Dowden, and also the Court of Appeal decision of Oxley and Hiscox, where the court ended up looking at wider factors in addition to the contribution to the purchase price and to the express agreement. The consideration of these wider factors are only relevant to the second stage regarding the quantification of a beneficial interest in the property. But on the first stage of the to acquire a beneficial interest, Lloyds Bank and Rossett remains the leading authority. So if I could please ask that you read that highlighted passage if you have not already.
On page 13.
Yes, my lord.
Yes, we have read it. Well, at least I have read it, and I'm sure
Yeah,
David has read it too.
yeah.
Thus, following this authority, I will now lead you to Lloyds Bank and Rossett as it commands, to page 30 of the bundle, my lords. And this extract is relevant because it's the exact extract where Lord Bridge says that only a contribution to the purchase price or an express agreement is sufficient to show that there was a common intention.
Yes.
Thank you, my lord.
Yeah, remember,
Given that Ms. Delgado did not contribute to the purchase price, and secondly, there was no express agreement between Mr. Tucker and Ms. Delgado, I apologize, regarding the beneficial interest of the property, the only conclusion that can be drawn from these two authorities is that she has not been able to acquire beneficial interest, regardless of whatever her conduct was whilst in the house.
The difficulty with these cases is that they're all fact specific, as we know. And in that case, what the wife had done was mostly decorating.
Yes, exactly.
And she made no financial contribution either to the purchase or to the cost of renovation. Now, in this case, we've got a mighty great capital injection into your client's house in circumstances where if she was paying mortgage installments, it would enable the court to declare a constructive trust and that she has a beneficial interest in the house. But are you submitting that because it was a capital payment, it should be treated differently from paying ongoing mortgage installments?
This is what the consequence of the authority was, that a capital injection should be treated differently to one where the payment is regarding mortgages.
But why do you say why do you say that's the case?
On these facts, at least, it should be emphasized that the capital injection was for her use of the office, Meanwhile, if the money were to have been spent on the mortgage, that mortgage was being used on everybody in the house. It was being used on Mr. Pritchett, Mr. Tucker, and Lily.
But Mr. Abel-Slyman, where's the evidence that it was intended for her use of the office in circumstances where, as it turned out, he used it?
On the facts state that there's nothing in, respectfully, my lord, there seems to be nothing in the facts that Mr. Tucker did use the office. The reason for this argument is that Mr. Tucker.
You say, yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Tucker did. We were told Mr. Tucker did use the office. He used it between 2004 and whatever it was. He certainly did use it. And is it not difficult to draw a distinction between the mortgage payment and the payment, the lump sum she made? Both of these accrue surely to the ongoing value of the property. And it's rather different to the case you're looking at, where she just did some painting. And they all, as Sir David said, we look at the facts, and the facts don't seem to show these two circumstances to be similar at all. Would you not agree?
I'm afraid I disagree on the point of the facts, my lord. The facts state that the new office was made in 2004,
yes,
and that this is when the £50,000 was inherited. But the facts also state that Mr. Tucker was working from a home office from 2003. So what the injection of £50,000 did was create a second office for Ms. Delgado. This is relevant, paragraph 4 and paragraph 5 in page 2 of the bundle, my lord.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
But I mean, even if let's leave out who actually used the office. I mean, you can't get away from the fact that converting the house to have a second room, which cost £50,000 to do, must have been beneficial to the sole owner of the property.
Yeah.
Can't have been otherwise. Well, in the absence of evidence that in some way, you know, like a badly positioned swimming pool, it actually lowered the value of the property. I can see circumstances where you might have a lowering of the value or no increase in the value. But for the purposes of this moot, we have to assume that 50,000 spent on renovation work is going to bring about a corresponding increase in the value of the property.
Respectfully, my lord, yes, perhaps there would be some increase in the value, but it's very difficult to determine what this increase in the value was.
Well, that's a matter of evidence that we don't have.
Yeah, well,
isn't
okay,
it?
it's a matter of evidence.
Yeah.
But also, in order for Ms. Delgado to rely on this increase in value as being something that she can get her money back from, it's submitted that they must have shown an express agreement to this effect. Otherwise, it's submitted that Ms. Delgado did not go about this renovation just because it would increase the value of the house. She went about it for her own.
I don't think she has to do that. I mean, the short point is that your client acquiesced in this money being put in, which improved the value of his property. So why isn't he stopped from denying that she's got an interest, proprietary estoppel, which is mentioned in all these cases as being very similar to a constructive trust? Why isn't he stopped from denying it? He acquiesced. He let her spend the money.
So in regard with proprietary estoppel, in order for her to rely on this, in order for Ms. Delgado to rely on proprietary estoppel, it must be shown that there was a detrimental reliance, and it's submitted that when we look at all of the factors taken into account, there was no detrimental reliance by Ms. Delgado.
Well, I mean, I can see that you can say she had the benefit of living in the house, but on the other hand, she'd borne him a child and was bringing his child up. But I mean, you know, it was detrimental to her in the sense that she had 50 grand, which was her inheritance. But instead of keeping it liquid or putting it somewhere where she could get her hands on it, she's now tangled it up in his property, which he's now denying that she's able to get out again. Isn't that detrimental?
On balance, there is certainly detriment to it, but I would definitely say on the whole, her enjoyment of the house during those years outweighs that detriment.
All right. Well, that's a fair enough submission, and we can weigh it up.
Oh, thank you.
All right. You've got 7 minutes, Mr. Abelson, and I'm rather conscious that we may have derailed you a bit, so you better press on.
Oh, not at all. I'm much obliged, my lord. So even if my first submission is not accepted, your lordships could still find for the appellant based on my second.
Yeah.
My second submission is that even if the stack criteria does apply to the first stage, a common intention to raise a family together and share a home is not the same as a common intention to the beneficial interest in the property.
I think subject to what Mr. Dumas may say, I think we'd accept that.
Absolutely. I certainly accept that, yes.
Oh, thank you, my lord. So should I then move on to my third submission?
Yes, please.
Yes.
So I'll just highlight the consequence of that second submission is that there's no acquisition by Ms. Delgado of the beneficial interest.
Not on the basis that it was because that they were setting up a family home together. That won't do. Lots of authorities say that, and it's almost common sense that you can't get an interest in a property just because you choose to live there with somebody. It would be a shambles otherwise.
Mm-hmm. So in regard to the third submission, this is that Ms. Delgado's subsequent contributions to building a new home office are also inefficient and for a common intention. The desire of one party to live in comfortable surroundings does not amount to a common intention as to the beneficial interest between the parties. Furthermore, the construction of the new home, and this is a point that was been discussed a little bit already, was not made on a detrimental reliance that it would confer a beneficial interest.
Yeah.
Because we've addressed the second one quite a bit, I'll address the first one.
Mm-hmm.
For this, my authority is Geary and Rankine.
Mhm.
On page 75 of the bundle, please, my lords.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
I believe it hasn't been highlighted, but it's easily found at paragraph 21,
I remember it. Yeah.
around halfway through the first half of the paragraph.
Okay,
Absolutely.
just let me catch up.
Halfway down the page.
Yeah. Now, is this a sole name case or a joint name case?
This is a sole name case, my
Yeah,
lord.
it is. It is.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you're saying that the object of the search in amongst the evidence is to find intention common to both parties.
Yes, my lord.
The actual intention may have been expressly manifested or may be inferred from conduct, but an actual intention it remains. So we can infer from the conduct what the common intention was, can't we, if any?
Yes, my lord.
And if we can't do that, we can impute, can't we? After Jones and Kernot.
The court can only impute in regard to the second stage on the quantification.
I'm not sure. Didn't Lord Wilson say that he rejoiced that one could now impute at either stage? I'm not sure I'm right about this.
I think you may be. I'm just trying to find it. Mr. Evans, do you know where that remark was? To which
it was within a textbook, so I haven't
I'm just trying
included
to find
it within.
it somewhere. I read it, but I can't remember where.
Hold on, Jones and Kernot. Here we are.
I'm going through it at the moment, but I don't remember where. Can we not take it that it is there?
It's at paragraph 78. I don't have the page number because I'm working from a different copy of the report, which was my own, actually, because I'd already annotated it before the bundle arrived, this particular case. And it's at page, it's at paragraph 78.
Page 136.
See, he says, common intention. Yeah, yes, he is talking about the first limb. He says, I warmly applaud the development, that the common intention which impresses a constructive trust upon the legal ownership of the family home can be imputed to the parties to the relationship. So he's talking about actually creating or establishing the common intention trust. He's not talking about quantification there. And Lord Walker and Brenda Hale, they talk about the same further up in the judgments, but we haven't got time to look at it. So I mean, that was really in parenthesis, really. We basically have to look for the common intention. If we can find it, that's an end of it. If we can't find it, we may have to infer it from the party's conduct. And if we can't do that, we may, on the facts, as I understand the law now, impute it, which means say what they ought to have said if they were reasonable people. Quite a big difference from when the cases were decided in the old days.
Yes, my lord. But it's submitted that even if we do, that even if it is accepted that there's a second stage can be imputed, none of the facts give rise to that there was a common intention between the parties, and the reason for this, and these facts were also in Stack and Dowden, though perhaps we're a bit pressed on time, so instead of referring you to them, I will just say them quickly, is that there was a vastly unequal contribution to the property. So even if she has spent 50,000, even if Ms. Delgado had spent 50,000 pounds on the property, the fact that Mr. Tucker has spent 500,000, and then in addition to that also utility payments.
Well, easy. He didn't spend 500. He put in 100. He put in 150.
150.
Oh, well, ultimately it will amount to 500,000 pounds, my lords.
No, he put in 500. He put in 150, and he then paid 200 off the mortgage.
Yes, at the present time. However, the figure I was referring to was the purchase price, my lords.
But that's not what he put in.
It's what he'll be eventually putting in. But yes, I accept.
Yeah, but we're dealing with it in the here. We're dealing with it in the here and now.
No, yes, quite.
Okay.
I don't really accept that one.
Okay. I'm not sure if I'm running out of time.
I think you probably have, but don't worry.
I think someone's got the card who's going to put it up. And
Thomas has the card, but I think.
Oh, it's time.
Can we not let her answer our question?
So your question regarding that he still hasn't paid all.
Well, you were suggesting a different number of pounds spent to the one which we believe to be the case.
Either one is fine, my lords. It's.
Okay, well, let's leave it at that.
I was just referring to the ultimate price, but even in the here and now, Mr. Tucker has still contributed substantially more than
Sure.
Mr.
Sure. But with that, if we're against you on the appeal, then that would go to quantification, wouldn't it? Which your junior is going to deal with.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, we better stop, or we'll get to the situation where we have to then equal up with more time for everybody else. So it's now, Mr. Arundel, you're opposing this, aren't you?
I am, my lord, yes.
Yeah, and I can just find my piece of paper. Yes, all right, off you go. You've got 20 minutes from now
Thank you, my lord.
to respond to Cameron's appeal.
Okay, so I'd like to begin by addressing submissions 2 and 3 of the senior appellant's argument. I think it is crucial to note that my learned friend has strayed away from the initial ground of appeal. So the appeal in this case was granted because of the contentious area of law at hand. So to this day, there is a lot of confusion as to whether Lloyds, Bank and Rossett applies or Stack and Dowden applies to sole name cases. And this is what the court should be focusing on. The Court of Appeal has already established in this case that a common intention exists. So I don't want to spend too much time reiterating the facts of the Court of Appeal.
Sorry, which case are you talking about? Where the Court of Appeal where the court's already decided there's a common intention?
In the case at hand, my lord.
In our case.
Yes, my lord.
But the Court of Appeal has said that.
Yes, my lord.
But it's under attack on the basis that they were wrong.
Yeah.
It's under attack, my lord, because my learned friend is arguing that Lloyds Bank and Rossett applies, whereas I want to focus on the fact that Stack and Dowden applies. And ultimately, your decision in this case, my lords, will clarify the law in this area, which is why it's so important that we focus on whether Lloyds Bank and Rossett applies or whether Stack and Dowden applies. If the latter, Stack and Dowden applies, then we will be able to refer to the whole course of dealing, and we don't have to limit ourselves to only looking and considering direct financial contributions.
But there is a direct financial contribution.
Not from Gloria, there isn't, my lord.
But she puts in 50,000.
That's in under the case of Lloyds Bank and Rossett, my lord. There are 2 types of common intention constructive trust. The second type of common intention constructive trust, there has to be a direct contribution to either the purchase price or the mortgage repayments. This contribution.
I think that's what we took issue with your learned opponent, that it's not logical that you make a distinction between paying off the mortgage and a whacking rate capital contribution later on.
Well, my lord, I absolutely agree, and that is what I will go on to clarify for us.
And I think we're sort of provisionally on your side on this, but not necessarily. I mean, you could argue us round to a different point of view.
We'll see how things go, my lord. I think I'll begin with my first submission.
Absolutely. Don't let me take you off your course, Mr. Arundel.
Thank you, my lord. So Rossett has gone too far in limiting the beneficial interest. So now, as my learned friend stated, it can only be, a beneficial interest can only arise when there has been direct financial contributions, which, as you agreed, my lord, is incorrect. And the law should be changed in order for Stack and Dowden to be followed. Stack and Dowden would allow us to look at the whole course of dealing, which includes indirect financial contributions.
Well, it can't be things like looking after children.
Well, my lord, I disagree. I think in the current day and age, I think it's very important that looking after children is considered.
You better take us to the passage in Stack and Dowden, which is the high water mark of what you're saying.
I will in time, my lord. If I could just respond to your comment about looking after children. In this society, in this day and age, women have an equal opportunity to go out and earn a job. They have as much potential as men do in business. And for that reason, for Gloria to remain at home would suggest that she is enabling Cameron to go out and earn money in order to pay the direct financial contributions. So the whole course of dealing, because of Stack and Dowden, can be followed, in which case we can look at things like the fact that Gloria has, rather than gone out and pursue her career as perhaps a yoga instructor, she has remained and looked after Lily. And in actual fact, she has worked without payment as Cameron's secretary, supporting the idea that there has been a common intention. If I could turn you to page 104 in your bundles, my lord.
Would you be kind enough to give me the paragraph number in the case? Because this is another case which I've had from the old days when I used to be a sitting High Court judge, and because I've annotated it, I've used it.
So this is Gissing and Gissing, my lord.
Oh, you want to go to Gissing?
Yes, please, my lord.
Right, just a minute.
Because I think it's important to identify the approach of the court in Gissing and Gissing, and even Petite and Petite.
Well, yeah. Tell us again, where in Gissing is this? Is this Lord Diplock?
This is Lord Diplock, my lord. Let me just find it for you. It's 105 in your bundle.
Yeah, no, I have it. This one I've got numbered and paginated from your bundle, so that's all right.
It would be page 907.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
So at paragraph B, Lord Diplock states that it should be highlighted in your text, or perhaps if you're working off your own copy.
Yeah, I know what you're looking at.
As in so many branches of English law, in which legal rights and obligations depend on the intentions of the parties to a transaction, the relevant intention of each party is the intention which was reasonably understood by the other party to be manifested by that party's words or conduct, notwithstanding that he did not consciously formulate that intention in his own mind. Yeah, so that was Lord Diplock in Gissing. Yeah, Rossett has gone on to completely change this and is limiting constructive trust to arise only where there has been an express agreement. Yet Lord Diplock did not have that intention, and the courts did not want to limit common intention constructive trusts in such a restrictive manner. If you look on to the next highlighted paragraph.
You're on page 907 of the report, are you, right?
I am on page 907 at the top of the page.
Each case must depend upon its own facts, but there are a number of factual situations which often recur. Yeah, that's fine, but I'm not sure where that particularly gets us, is it?
My lord, I'm trying to identify the unreasonableness of where the decision in Rossett has come from. Lord Diplock was working towards an approach which is more in line with Stack and Dowden. Unfortunately for the law in this area, Rossett, the court in Rossett decided to limit a common intention constructive trust to only when there are an express agreement or direct financial contributions.
Yes.
So, my lord, I'm just trying to enable you to see how this has become out of line with the intentions of the court.
Well, we know the court can change things to suit circumstances, even if we go back to Lord Reed in Pettit and Pettit, where he states somewhere that, and he was working, of course, on the 1882 legislation, but he says the law must change as circumstances make it change. I forget where that is now.
I have a couple of quotes from Lord Reed, if you'd like to hear them, my lord.
But if you think they're relevant, you better tell us.
Okay, if you turn to page 99 of your bundle.
Hang on. Will it come unpinned? Just a minute. Yeah, okay. Yep.
Lord Reed states that, as I understand it, the competing view is that when the wife makes direct contributions to the purchase price by paying something either to the vendor or to the building society, which is financing the purchase, she gets a beneficial interest in the house, although nothing was ever said or agreed about this at the time, but that when her contributions are only indirect, by way of paying sums which the husband would otherwise have had to pay, she gets nothing, unless at the time of the acquisition there was an agreement that she could get a share. So here Lord Reed is criticising the distinction between direct and indirect financial contributions. Yeah, the court in Rossett ignore this and say that no, it has to be direct contributions to the purchase price. Whereas Lord Reed in this case is saying that why can't indirect financial contributions still matter? Because although, for example, the wife may go out and buy groceries for the children, she does this to enable the husband to pay for the purchase price of the house or to contribute towards the mortgage repayments.
I mean, this is slightly the trouble with the senior courts issuing great edicts about things that are actually not relevant to the facts, because, and so you could say it's obiter, because the facts of this case was that the lady spent £220 out of her savings on furnishings and laying a lawn. So, I mean, nobody's actually good. So, I mean, that should have been sufficient to dispose of the case. Do you see what I mean? And,
Yes,
and
my lord.
what Lord Reed is doing, he's pointing up the ridiculousness of exactly what you're saying, that you get an interest if you pay the mortgage, but you don't get one if you do various other things. But I'm not sure we're very much, I'm speaking for myself, not dreadfully assisted. I see where you're coming from. In going back so far as this is all 40 years ago, and then the law has moved on. We've now got Stack and Dowden. We've now got cases like Webster, which you put in the bundle very, very helpfully. But and nobody's actually mentioning it in the skeletons, but it's here. And Judge Behrens, who's a Chancery circuit judge, but Chancery man, he decided that all sorts of quite unlikely things were good enough to give the lady in that case a 30-something% interest in the house.
Okay, my lord, let's move forward on to Webster and Webster then. Apologies, I was just trying to
no.
enable
I
you.
understand. I understand. Just a bit worried about your time. That's all, because it has moved on a lot since the 1970s. But right. It's the top of, is it the top of page 149?
116, I believe, my lord.
No, the bundle number I've got is 149 for Webster.
What Mr. Arundel, what are you asking us to look at Webster now? Because
I think that's what the court wants.
Did you say 149? Is Webster 100?
I think it's 116, my lord, in the bundle.
Ah.
I don't think it is Webster.
It isn't. 116 is Jones and Kernow.
If you go to 149, Mr. Arundel, and look at paragraph 33 on that page.
My lord, my bundle only goes up to page 134.
Oh dear. Well, you haven't got the full bundle. Well, let me tell you what Judge Behrens said. I readily accept that the indirect contributions that Angela Webster made to the family budget are such that the court would infer that Angela Webster had some interest in 57 Stepney Road under the second of Lord Bridge of Harridge's categories in Lloyd's Bank against Rossett and another. And what she'd done was, I can't absolutely remember what she'd done because so many of these cases, but that she had, I'll tell you what she'd done. He paid the mortgage. It was in his sole name. She paid some of the bills for furnishings, services, and the children's clothes and food.
Yes, my lord.
So, I mean, here is a first instance decision going back to 2009, which, I mean, does everything you need to rely on for your case, isn't it?
Well, that's why I'm relying on it, my lord.
You weren't relying on it.
I don't think you were.
Well, I haven't moved on to my second submission yet, my lord.
Do I see it in your skeleton?
Sorry?
Do I see it in your skeleton, Webster?
You should do, my lord, yeah.
Oh, all right.
Really? It's up there. It's top of page 9. Yeah.
Sorry, if it's there, forgive me. Yeah.
It is. Yes, it is. It's the top of page 9.
Sorry, my lord. I was going to move on to that into my second submission.
I've jumped to it too quickly, Mr. Arundel. That's what you want to say. Yeah.
Not to worry. Not to worry. And the reason I did bring that up is for, as you said, my lord, this is an example of the courts actually, although they're following Lloyd Bank and Rossett, they're doing so in a way which is more in line with Stack and Dowden, because they're allowing indirect financial contributions.
Yeah. But yours isn't an indirect financial contribution. Your lady has put in £50,000 into this house. Now, my point was this to your learned opponent, Mr. Abel Steinman, that if it's right, as Lord Bridge said, even taking Lord Bridge's view as being right in 1971, that ongoing mortgage repayments could count, how can it be that if ongoing mortgage repayments count as a contribution that counts, how can a capital contribution not count? Well, this is your point.
I think that is my point, my lord.
Grasp it with both hands.
we're not really talking about odds and ends that she paid for. She put in a great wad of cash here.
I agree, my lord.
Let's not worry too much about whether she paid to cut the grass, which is what has troubled the court at times in the past. And we
Okay.
don't have to address that issue. She's paid real money over.
Yes, my
What do
lord.
you say about proprietary estoppel?
Proprietary estoppel has been avoided by the courts in this area, my lord. I don't think it would be wise for us to use that. It has been addressed in Gissing and Gissing and Petit, and the courts decided to avoid using proprietary estoppel in this way because they found that the common intention constructive trust is a much more effective way of evaluating the law in this area.
If you look at Lord Justice Chadwick in Oxley and Hiscox, which is referred to in many of these cases, you will find he lists a number of cases there where the judges in the Court of Appeal have more or less aligned constructive trusts to proprietary estoppel because in each case, the recipient of the money's conscience is bound because it would be unfair for him to take the benefit of the money that somebody else put into the project.
The effect of these two is exactly this, or is likely to be, I think in this case may well be said to be, the same thing.
The only reason I didn't go along the lines of the proprietary estoppel route, my lords, is that the courts have decided against it in previous case law. So in this decision, I chose to go in line with what was decided in Stack and Dowden, which is another House of Lords decision, rather than create even more confusion to the law. I think trying to introduce proprietary estoppel into this area of law is only going to ultimately create more problems.
But can you identify a case where someone has put a large chunk of capital into somebody else's property to which they acquiesced, where proprietary estoppel's been discussed and rejected?
There have definitely been cases I've read, my lord. Off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to give you one. I believe in Gissing and Gissing and Petit, they discussed whether to rely or not on proprietary estoppel, and they came to the conclusion that they would remain with the common intention constructive trust. Ultimately, my lord, I do want you to focus on the common intention constructive trust, as this is one which has been used throughout the case law successfully. If that's okay, my lord.
Yeah, absolutely. If you haven't got much longer, Mr. Arundel, so you better press on.
Okay, are we happy with Webster and Webster?
I'm very happy.
Well, fine.
Okay, then I will move you towards looking at Stack and Dowden.
Yeah. Well, tell us.
So at page 39 of your bundle.
Could you give me the paragraph number for this one?
It's at paragraph F.
No, the paragraph number.
The paragraph
26,
number.
26.
26, thank you.
Is that the one you want?
I believe so, my lord, thank you.
Yeah, well, Lord Bridges' extreme doubts.
Yes, my lord. Lord Bridges' extreme doubt whether anything less will do was certainly consistent with many first instance and Court of Appeal decisions, but I respectfully doubt whether it took full account of the views expressed in Gissing and Gissing, which is what I was referring to earlier, my lord, which is why I tried to get you to understand the court's intention in Gissing and Gissing, but then Rossett went out of line and restricted when you could apply for a beneficial interest. If you go to page 49 of your bundle now, my lords.
Paragraph number?
I'm working out the bundle, my lord. It's paragraph F in the bundle.
F, I think. It's F. It's a bit more Lord Walker here.
Sorry, when you say F, there is a number to the paragraphs.
Sorry, the number is 60, towards the end of paragraph 60.
Thank you very much.
If that's the one you mean, isn't it, Mr. Randall? A bit more Lord Walker's.
This is Baroness Hale of Richmond, my lords.
Yes, it is Baroness Hale.
Is it? Then,
Yeah.
Yes, my lord. And here she states that the law has indeed moved on in response to changing social and economic conditions.
But she's
Yeah.
talking about.
The
Yeah.
search is to ascertain the parties' shared intentions, actual, inferred, or imputed, with respect to the property in the light of their whole course of conduct in relation to it.
Yeah, but you've got to be careful here because she's talking about a joint names case. And the approach to joint names cases and sole name cases is different, because in a joint names case, you know that she's got some interest. Indeed, she's got a prima facie half interest. So it's not the same as where you've got two people who are strangers to one another, one of whom owns the property, the other happens to live in it. Strangers in legal sense.
This is why, my lord, the courts have tried to move in more of a direction of having one approach to both sole name cases and joint name cases.
No, I don't think that's right. They've been very, very clear that they're different. And Hale says that you've got to distinguish between the two. She says it paragraph, anyway, it doesn't matter. Paragraph 65, no, 66. There's a quote in the middle. There are differences between the sole and joint name cases when trying to divine the common intentions or understandings between the parties. That's for the reason I've just indicated. That in the one, the woman has no interest yet. In the other, you know she's got one. It's just a question of working out the nature of it and the quantification of it. So the approaches are very different.
Thank you, my lord. I actually think I'm out of time.
Okay, I haven't seen the time sticker go up.
There was a 1 minute flash came up just now.
Okay, all right then. Well, if you're out of time, Mr. Randall, we'll have to draw stumps. Thank you very much for your submissions.
Thank you, my lord.
Mr. Abu Sulaiman, if there's anything briefly that you want to come back on, arising out of what Mr. Arundel has submitted, this is your opportunity, and I think I'm told you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, my lord, but Mr. Arundel has not gone beyond what was written on the skeleton, thus I have nothing further to add.
Okay, you're happy, right.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we turn to Gloria's cross appeal, appealing that not only should she retain her interest in the property, but in terms of quantification, it should be more generous than what the Court of Appeal awarded her, which I take to be £50,000. The problem's not completely clear about that, but it doesn't matter too much. And Mr. Bala, I think it's you to present the appeal on this respect.
That is correct, your lordships. May I proceed?
Pardon?
As this court has already heard submissions from my co-counsel, Mr. Arundel, that it was Mr. Tucker and Mr. Delgado's common intention that they should each have a beneficial interest in the property. How I will be proceeding now on the cross appeal is that I'll be making submissions to show that in order to give effect to that common intention, the court must look at Mr. Tucker and Mr. Delgado's conduct in its entirety over the whole course of their relationship in order to determine in all the circumstances what would be considered a fair share. And my second submission rely on the fact that if your lordships do not find it sufficient that looking at the entire course of their relationship that it is a fair share, it would be fair for them to have an equal beneficial interest. Since there was natural love and affection at the forefront of their relationship, there existed a common intention for the beneficial interest in the property to be shared in equal shares.
Very well, thank you.
If it pleases your lordships, can I proceed with my first submission?
Please do. Yep.
When quantifying the beneficial interest, and I will point to authority this very shortly, all conduct must be taken into consideration which would shed some light on what shares were intended. This would include both financial contributions and other factors as well, such as non-financial contributions. On this ground, it is the appellant's position that in looking at the entirety of Ms. Delgado and Mr. Tucker's conduct over the entire course of their relationship, that is taking into account her financial contributions as well as her non-financial contributions, and Mr. Tucker repeatedly reassuring her that she would have an equal beneficial interest in the property if anything were to happen to him, and Ms. Delgado subsequently relying on that gives rise to the idea that it is fair that the beneficial interest in the property should be shared equally. I will be using two cases to support my submissions. I will deal with the facts and the principle of each case separately if your lordships would like to hear it, and then I will apply the principle laid out in both to the case before this court.
Yes, take your own course, thank you.
To aid this submission, may I ask your lordships to direct their attention to the case of Midland Bank PLC and Cook, which your lordships can find on page 151 of the bundle.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll find it here somewhere.
161. Hold on a second.
151, Your Lordship.
151, I think.
151. Sorry, haven't got my
There it
ear
is.
trumpet in.
Middle American Cup, yes. I
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
it.
we had that. This is Lord Justice Waite, isn't it?
Yes. Would Your Lordships care for the summary of the facts?
Well,
I-
take a lot of your time if you do.
I think, can we not take it that we have read the case and we are,
Actually,
are you familiar with the facts?
if it's going to matter, what we haven't got, we've only got the first few lines of the head note, and then we cut to the judgment.
Yeah.
So tell us what you want to tell us out of the judgment, point us to out of the judgment. If we find we need to know the facts, you'll have to tell us them because we haven't got them.
Well, even though that this is a case that contains a sole legal owner, what's more important is if Your Lordships direct their attention to Justice Waite's ruling on page 153 and the highlighted section in yellow, Your Lordships will see that Justice Waite stated that in order to determine what proportions the beneficial interest the parties must have assumed to have intended, the entire course of dealing has to be looked at when assessing the proportion of the beneficial interest, and the court should not restrict themselves in that interpretation solely to the financial contributions of the parties when there are clearly other factors that shed or throw light on the question of what shares were intended. As I previously stated for Your Lordships, it was the case of Midland Bank PLC and Cook was one that involved a property that was in the name of a sole legal owner. This exact same approach was adopted, was endorsed and further developed by the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom in the leading case of Jones and Kernet, which Your Lordships can find on page 112 of the bundle. Once again, Your Lordships, I'm aware of the facts of this case, but even though that this was a case that involved joint legal owners, what is important is Lord Walker and Lady Hale's comments in obiter, which Your Lordships can find on page 130 of the bundle.
Could you please give me the paragraph number?
It is paragraph E and F. I do not
No,
believe...
the paragraph number.
Number. Hang on, I'll give it to you. I got it in front of me.
My apologies, Your Lordships.
So,
just that I'm working from a document of my own.
That's all right. It's paragraph 51 and 52. Are you starting in our judgment the whole course of dealing? Is that where you were referring to, Mr. Bala? Yeah,
that's correct.
It's the second part of third part of paragraph 51. It's quoting, we get Chadwick, LJ, and Oxley and Hiscock.
That is correct.
And then it goes on from there.
That is the one. Yes.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah, good.
So Lord Walker and Lady Hale suggested that when quantifying the beneficial interest of a non-legal owner in a case which involves a sole legal owner, Lord Walker and Lady Hale reiterated what Justice Waite said, that the whole course of dealing should be given a broad meaning. And while financial contributions are relevant, the court must take into account other factors which may enable the court to decide what shares were intended or fair in this case. And when I meant that they built on it, Justice Waite only mentioned what shares were intended. And Lord Walker and Lady Hale in this case went a step further and said that it was not just what was intended, but what may also be fair.
Yes.
So in applying the ruling of Justice Waite and the obiter of Lord Walker and Lady Hale in the leading case of Jones and Kernet, the appellants submit that in undertaking a survey of the whole course of dealing between Ms. Delgado and Mr. Tucker, and taking account of all their conduct which sheds light on the question of what shares were intended, it is clearly fair that Ms. Delgado should have an equal beneficial interest in the property.
Well, hang on a minute.
Well,
Mr. Cameron was declining to agree with her that she should have an interest in the property inter vivos, wasn't he, while they were all alive? He did say, don't you worry, if I die, you'll be looked after in my will. But you see, what it doesn't say here that this is a free-for-all and the court just looks at what's fair. It says, if it's not possible, this is subparagraph 4 of paragraph 51 of whatever this kid, Jones and Kernot. If it's not possible to ascertain by direct evidence or inference what their actual intention was as to the shares, in other words, as to the quantification of the shares in which they would own? The answer is that each is entitled to that share which the court considers fair. But if we can, by inference, work out, assuming if it is the case that the appeal is going to fail, if that's the case, if that's our decision, the appeal, then on the cross appeal, if it's possible by inference to work out what the actual intentions probably were, then that's what we have to give account to. We can't then just have a sort of roving inquiry into their whole relationship and say, oh, it sounds like it would be fair that you have, this much, so much, 50%. Can we?
Well, Your Lordships, it is the appellant's position that the court needs to look at the factors that are relevant, which should be sufficient to ascertain in what proportions that the beneficial interest was.
No, but you're not addressing my point with respect. My point was, if it is possible to work out the common intentions by inferences, then you don't go further than that, because you found their common intention.
That's it.
And that's what the court is looking for.
You've done it by that.
You don't embark on a roving investigation, or which is actually quite a big investigation. If you have to look over the whole period of their lives, you have to have discovery of all the bank statements, all the bills. It's a major performance at considerable expense. So the court tries not to do that if it can avoid it. So if it can find the common intention, that's what it will apply. Am I right or wrong, Mr. Bala?
Well, Your Lordship, there's nothing on the facts that suggests that at the time of when Mr. Cameron owned the property by himself, as in he was a sole legal owner, that Ms. Delgado would have an equal beneficial interest. It was only said that if something happens to Mr. Cameron, only in that situation would Ms. Delgado.
That's my point. That's my point. He resisted her having a joint interest, didn't he? He said, no, it'd be better if it stays in my name. But don't worry, because it'll be in my will. But having somebody in your will implies that you're not agreeing that they should have an interest while you're still alive.
That is correct, Your Lordships, and that is why I would like to make submissions to show that in things like child rearing Lily, the contributions to Mr. Tucker's business, and the housekeeping duties cumulatively will show that Ms. Tucker was entitled to an equal beneficial share in the property, being that of 50%. So okay. In terms of child rearing and raising and caring for Lily, when Ms. Delgado and Mr. Tucker moved into their house, Lily was about 5 years old. At that time, Mr. Tucker was working long hours as an architect. He had a very busy work schedule. And because of his need to provide for the family of four, Ms. Tucker was primarily caring for and raising Lily. Mr. Pritchett did spend some time with Lily, but that does not suggest that he was looking after Lily. And in all the time that Ms. Delgado was looking after Lily, Mr. Tucker never objected to it. And so the balance of, or the entirety of taking care of Lily fell to Ms. Delgado. And if Ms. Delgado did not believe that she would be entitled to an equal share in the beneficial interest, she wouldn't have taken on the responsibility to be the sole parent.
I don't know about that. I mean, here she is a mother bringing up her child.
Yes.
It's very difficult to make the quantum leap between that. And this is why the court tries to decline to do this, to saying you've got an interest in bricks and mortar.
Well, my response to that, or my submission, is that it is not saying that Ms. Delgado would not have cared for Lily. It's to say that she would not be the sole person or the sole parent caring for Lily. There were two other parents, being that of Mr. Tucker and Mr. Pritchett, who she could have asked for help in order to care for Lily. But because she was led to believe that she would have an equal beneficial interest, she took on the responsibility to be the sole parent.
Where do you get the she was led to believe that she'd have a joint beneficial interest from?
Not a joint beneficial interest, Your Lordship, an equal beneficial interest.
Where do you get that from, that assertion?
Well, on the facts, which is paragraph 6 of the facts, it says that when Ms. Delgado asked Mr. Cameron about her beneficial share, he reassured her that if anything were to happen to him, she and Mitchell would receive the house under his will, which would make her and Mr. Pritchett joint tenants of
Yeah, but the implication of that is that he was not willing to do it while he was still alive. And he said it would be better if the property remained in his name.
Yeah.
So he's resisting exactly what you're submitting for.
That is correct.
As part of his common, I mean, this demonstrates it wasn't part of his common intention, because he said, if I die, you and the other man will have the half, I'll leave it to you. But there's been another case where there was it's in the bundle, there's a will case where it specifically says that the fact you agree to leave something in a will doesn't show an intention, a common intention that you own any part of it at the moment, which is obvious.
That is correct, Your Lordship, which is why the submissions I'm making for this court is to show not that there was a common intention, but taking in account the entire course of dealing, it was fair for there to be an equal beneficial interest in the property. And that was mentioned by the court in Jones and Kernet in the absence of there being any evidence to show a common intention for the
But that's assuming that the court can look at what's fair, even though it might be able to work out what their common intention probably was. But I don't think the court can do that, Mr. Bala.
I think, Mr. Bala, I'm sympathetic to what you're trying to do, but I think you're going further than the court has done, or indeed can do.
Well, in response to that, my submission to that is that in looking at the entire course of dealing, the submissions that I make can shed light on some of the factors that would point in the direction of there being an equal beneficial interest. And if your lordships are satisfied with that, then that will be the case.
Well, I don't think that addresses the point that I'm putting to you, which is that you don't get to the stage of looking at everything if you can construe or tease out what their common intention was. For example, if there'd been an express discussion about this and they'd said, all right, you put that 50,000 in and you can have a third, it wouldn't matter how many good things Gloria had done, it would still be that you'd get what the common intention was, even though that might not be as fair as something which the court would otherwise have ordered in Gloria's favor.
That is correct, your lordships. And it may be the case that the court may not order what was considered fair in the circumstances, but given that Mr. Cameron reassured Ms. Delgado on numerous occasions that she would have an equal beneficial interest in the property in the future if anything happens to him, her reliance on that and the subsequent conduct by Ms. Delgado would give rise to there being a common intention. And as I previously submitted in the beginning, if this court is not satisfied that, or that is not satisfied that it is fair for the court to say that there was an equal beneficial interest that is to be owned between Ms. Delgado and Mr. Tucker, then a common intention can be derived by looking at whether there was natural love and affection at the fore of their relationship.
Well, we haven't got much evidence about that, have we?
Well, that is actually my second submission. And seeing as if I have about 4 minutes, if it's okay with your lordships, I'd like to move to that submission.
Yeah, do move on, yeah.
So as I previously submitted, when deciding in what proportions the beneficial interest in the property is to be shared, the entire course of conduct has to be looked at. And if in looking at that entire course of relationship, if there's evidence which indicates that the parties did not have a relationship in which natural love and affection were at the fore, then a common intention to share the property in equal shares cannot be inferred. And my authority for that is Graham, York, and York, which your lordships can find on page 155 of the bundle.
Yeah, that's a case where there wasn't much natural love and affection, isn't it?
That is correct, Mr. Graham, York, and
do we have any evidence about this relationship at all in the problem? I don't think we do we?
No, we don't.
But it might have been a very happy, loving one, or it might have been that they argued like cats and dogs.
Well, in looking at the activities or the conduct between them, such as while Mr. Tucker was busy working, Ms. Delgado never asked him to help her with caring or raising for Lily or the inheritance she received. She used that 50,000 pounds. She gave up her business and her business interests in order to support Mr. Tucker in his venture. And someone who does things like that will only proceed on that or embark on such a journey or embark in or do such things only if there was natural love and affection at the fore of their relationship. No one would do that if they did not believe there was no natural love and affection.
What would be unfair, do you say, about a decision if you hold your Court of Appeal decision on the principle of your client having an interest, which would then have to be quantified? What would be unfair about having an interest which is in the proportion that her contribution was compared to the contribution of Cameron?
Well, if we're going to look at it in that sense, Your Lordship, then we will be strictly looking at, in terms of, if we would look at the comparisons of the investment or the time that Mr. Tucker put in versus what Ms. Delgado put in. Ms. Delgado clearly put in much more time into the non-financial contributions as Mr. Tucker did. Mr. Tucker took on the bulk of making financial contributions, but there were also non-financial contributions which were made by Ms. Delgado, which revolves around my submissions that this is what the court should be taking into account.
All right.
And
yeah, well, that goes to saying that she should have an interest. I'm not sure I understand that goes to show that she should have a half interest.
Well, so what was said in Graham York and your lordships can find that on page 157 of the bundle, which is paragraph 16. Justice Tomlinson said that in upholding the decision of the lower court to grant Ms. Graham York 25% in the beneficial interest, there was in their relationship, there was not one in which love and affection was at the fore. And so they could not, then a common intention to share equally in the property could not be inferred. But when we look at the entire course of dealing or the relationship between Mr. Tucker and Ms. Delgado, based on her being the sole person who's raising and caring for Lily, all the contributions she made to Mr. Tucker's business in terms of preparing the dinners, accommodating his colleagues, to what I remember, who flew in from Germany, taking on all the housekeeping duties. No one would go to that extent if natural love and affection was not considered to be at the fore of their relationship.
Right. Well, Mr. Bala, thank you very much. I see that your time is expired. Thank you for your submissions.
Thank you, Your Lordship.
So, Mr. Tarascas, we turn to you now to respond on behalf of Cameron as to whatever. I mean, you only need to, of course, to address this problem if you fail on the first point. So we have to assume for this purpose that you've failed on the first point without actually deciding it. And then you now have to say what it is that she ought to have and why she shouldn't have as much as a half.
Thank you, my lord. Yes, for my first submission today, I would like to submit that if this court does find, and this is only if the court finds a common intention constructive trust, Ms. Delgado is entitled to £80,000 or less. For my second submission, I will be dealing with the £50,000, and I will put to the court that it was used for renovations and that it was a gift. And if this court should not find that it is a gift, it should be held on as a resulting trust, and she's only entitled to the £50,000 that she put in. And for my third submission is that a 50-50 split would be inequitable, as Mr. Tucker never intended for Ms. Delgado to be a joint legal owner of the property. Before I begin with my first submission, I would like to just rebut my learned friend Mr. Bala's submission about love and affection in the relationship. We do not have any evidence of love or affection, but we do have evidence that both Mr. Tucker and Ms. Delgado were in other relationships. As of 2012, Ms. Delgado was in a relationship with a woman called Claire for 7 years. So now that would mean she was in a relationship with Claire for 16 years by 2021. And Cameron and Mitchell, by this date, would be in a relationship for 27 years. So although we do not have any evidence of a loving relationship, we do have evidence that they are in other relationships. Anyway, I would like to proceed with my first submission. And for my first submission, I would like to look closely at the facts and work through based upon if there is a common intention where the detriment could have occurred. So if we start with the first property where they moved, which was bought with £80,000 by Mr. Tucker, with a £220,000 mortgage. Based on the facts in paragraphs 2 and 3 of the problem, we know that this is where Miss Delgado stayed at home and looked after Lily, the child. So if the common intention found is to be to maintain a family home, this would be where the detriment in her to Miss Delgado would have occurred. So that raises the question, what would she be entitled to of this money? So of the £80,000 that Mr. Tucker paid, considering there are 3 parents, we have Mr. Tucker, Mr. Pritchett, and Miss Delgado, I submit to the court that Miss Delgado would be entitled to 1/3 of it based upon her detriment looking after the child. This property was then sold for £450,000, and the £150,000 from that property was put into the second house at Freeman Drive in Rottingdean. That £150,000, if divided equally across all 3 parents, would be £50,000 each. The property in Rottingdean had a £350,000 mortgage, and over time it increased in value by 60% to £800,000. Mr. Tucker continued to make mortgage payments, and he paid off an extra £150,000, leaving a mortgage of £200,000 and a value in the property of £600,000. So for Miss Delgado to receive equal shares with Mr. Tucker, she is claiming to be entitled to £300,000 when actually she is not entitled anywhere close to that figure. If we take the £50,000 from the first property, where the detriment was for looking after the child, that would have increased to £80,000. So that 10% would have been 10% of the second property in Freeman Drive in Rottingdean. And so she would be entitled to 80% of the property if indeed this court finds that there is a common intention and that there is a detriment for the childcare. However, that is for your lordships to decide. With regards to my second submission for the £50,000 used for the renovations, Miss Delgado's intention for this, it was not for the common intention of the family home, it was to make an office for her business. Although it did not work out necessarily that she was the main occupier or the main user of the office, and it ended up being Mr. Tucker, I put to this court that this was in fact a gift. And the reason being is that Mr. Tucker benefited from this, and that essentially, if we look at Stack and Dowden, at page 49, paragraph 61, it is made clear that there must be a financial contribution towards the purchase price of the property if she wants to have an interest in the property. So along with my first submission, Miss Delgado's 50,000 was not at the purchase price, but it was separate. It was an outside capital sum put into the property, the second property. And if you were to look at it with inflation, with the increase in value of the property, which was by 60%, that 50,000 could be worth £80,000. However, if this court does not think it is a gift and that it was a failed gift, it would be held in a resulting trust for £50,000 and bounce back to Miss Delgado. So in that situation, Miss Delgado would only be entitled to the £50,000. If you do find the common intention, it is for this court to decide whether she would be entitled to the £50,000 plus the £80,000, or solely the £80,000 or solely the £50,000. But either way, it would not be a 50-50 split.
I'm a bit concerned about this idea that there was a gift. First of all, there's absolutely no evidence of it being a gift. And secondly, if it was a gift, it's all over. There's no case. because she's saying her interest. Well, actually, she's saying her interest is because of everything she did. But if she fails on that, then her case is essentially, I put in a large capital sum and I ought to have a sum back referable to that. I mean, if it was a gift, then she gets nothing. No question of resulting trusts arise. I don't think a resulting trust in her favour is pertinent on these facts. She either put it into the house with nothing being said about it, or the thinking behind the resulting trust is that you don't want to enrich somebody else. So I agree, the thinking behind it is the same as it would be behind a constructive trust, but I think that some of these concepts are getting a little bit confusing to your case, and I certainly don't see how you get a gift on its feet when there's absolutely no evidence of it.
Well, to find evidence of it being a gift, it generally is accepted that a gift could be the recipient who would benefit in the long term. So if we look at page 48 of the bundle, paragraphs 59 and 60, we can see that a gift, the person who benefits could be a child, in which case, here, as we've been discussing, Mr. Tucker's will, likely his assets would be passed on to his child, Lily. And if the money put into the house, the £50,000, was ultimately to pass to Lily, this could be seen as a gift. And therefore, Miss Delgado would, as you stated correctly, not be entitled to the £50,000 at all. Correct. And to support this, so with those valuations, to support this, the underlying message is my third submission, that Mr. Tucker never intended for Miss Delgado to be the joint legal owner. And therefore, it would be inequitable for her to receive an equal share in the property. If Mr. Tucker had intended for Miss Delgado to be the legal owner, it would have been made pertinent as per, and there's evidence for this on page 47, paragraph 52 in Stack and Dowden, whereby when they purchased the second property, he would have registered Miss Delgado's interests. However, this was not the case.
Well, no, that's what this is all about.
Yes.
But if you'd registered her interest, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it now. It would be entirely clear, wouldn't it?
Precisely, but that is not the case. And so it is for this court to decide if at all, if Miss Delgado is entitled to any money, anything of the property or of the 50,000 she put in, or if indeed it is, and how much, the quantity.
What would be objectionable about the conclusion that she ought to have back the same proportion that she put in, referable to the proportion that Cameron put in?
Cameron's contribution has been much greater. Cameron has been paying the mortgage for 24 years at this point.
Well, that would be a question of working through the maths, but just to keep the principle simple, and on assumption, well, in the first mortgage, it was not a repayment mortgage, so he didn't pay anything off that. It was an interest-only mortgage. The second one is a repayment mortgage. So clearly, any account that was taken, any working through of the maths, would have to give a credit for the amount that he's paid off the mortgage, which, as you rightly say, is 150,000. But granted that, what's wrong with if she's to have an interest, and we have to quantify it if that's the outcome, what's wrong with her getting back the same proportion referable to his that she put in pro rata?
Well, quite simply, she has not put in the same amount as Mr. Tucker.
No, but I mean, if you give her the proportion compared to his proportion, you give her the same proportion that she put in, referable to his proportion, as will be what she gets out.
If the house had not increased in value, their proportions, that monetary quantification of their proportions would have stayed the same. But do you not think that as the house has gone up in value, she should benefit from that increase in value? Because it is at least in part as a result of her having put in some money that the house is there and has gone up in value. Should she not benefit from that?
Indeed, the house has gone up in value, and I think that is for the court to decide. I personally, I do not believe Ms. Delgado should not receive extra, but if this court decides that she should receive extra for the house increasing, rather than the 50,000 she put in, it would be 80,000, and it still would not be equal value to the proportion to the. It would not be equal value as to what Cameron Tucker put into the house. So to clarify that, if we are saying that she should receive 80,000 which is the increased amount on the 50,000 that she put in, so 50,000 increased to 80,000. If she should receive the 80,000, that is still not an equal share. She is still not entitled to the equal share that Cameron has put in, as the total value is 600,000, and equal shares would be 300,000 each.
Well, let's go with that. Let's assume you're right that it shouldn't be 50-50. I repeat my question because I really haven't got your answer to it with respect. What is wrong with her having the same proportion out as the proportion she put in comparative to his contributions?
Just to clarify, are you saying that she should receive 50,000 as she put in 50,000?
No, I'm saying that you do them. You work out what how many times more than her contribution was his contribution. So, for example, if his contribution was 5 times her contribution, then when you extract the figures at the end of the day, he must have 5 times more than her. That will give you a figure for her, and he buys her out. But if he can't do that, he has to sell the property.
Oh, okay. Yes. Well, we could work that out now. Because Mr. Tucker, he put in 150,000 on the mortgage and 80,000 initially. So that would be 210,000 plus Miss Delgado's 50,000, which would be 260,000. Therefore, Mr. Tucker would be entitled to about probably more like 75%, and she would be entitled to like about 25%. Approximately. Even so, that is not equal shares, and it would not be a 50-50% 50-50 split.
Okay, so are you saying, sorry, you go, Alexander.
But that doesn't answer the question. Let's set aside for the moment the 50-50 story. What you were asked just now is, don't you think, I think by both of us, don't you think that she should benefit from the uplift in the property? So had it not uplifted at all, they'd both take out what they put in. If it's doubled, then they both get double what they put in. Would that not be an equitable answer?
If this court finds that she should receive the increase on the 50,000 she put in, she would receive £80,000. And yes, that may be an equitable outcome, and that is for this court to decide. However, it still would not come close to the equal shares that the learned friend is asking for.
All right, I don't think we can take this any further with you.
No.
Was there anything else you wanted to say, Mr. Tarascas? If you've got more time, feel free to continue.
They were my 3 submissions, and it was just to outline and deal with the quantitative aspect of the question. Okay. And that, I think that the 50,000 should be kept separate from the separate from the detriment incurred in the raising a family. In which case I have nothing further to add. Thank you very much.
All right, then, if you're happy, then we turn back to Mr. Bala. Is there anything that you wish to say in 3 minutes in response to Mr. Tarascas' submissions?
Very briefly, Your Lordships. Right at the beginning, Mr. Tarascas made mention to the fact that Mr. Cameron and Miss Delgado was not in a there was no natural love and affection at the fore of their relationship. And he mentioned that Miss Delgado was in a relationship with Claire And I apologize, I forget the number of years that Mr. Tarascus mentioned. But what I would like to say is, in response to that, is that Mr. Tucker and Miss Delgado, they were not in any relationship which would require them to be committed to each other. As far as when Ms. Delgado agreed to carry a child for Lily, for Mr. Tucker and Mr. Pitchett, and what she did in her personal life outside in terms of whom she was in a romantic relationship with, has no bearing on the natural love and affection, because it is possible for her to be in a relationship with someone else as well as fulfill her motherly duties to her child, as well as establish a relationship of natural love and affection with Mr. Tucker in this scenario. That is all I have to say, Your Lordships.
Very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your
Well,
Lordship.
that completes the moot. Now, I turn to the staff to get Mr. Dumar and myself into a breakout room where we can have a confidential discussion about what we're going to say, both on the substance and on the who wins the moot.
Right, now we're being invited to join room 1. Shall we join it?
I'll see you there, Alexander.
Right, have they gone? Is it just us?
They have indeed.
Just checking in case I say something rude.
There we are.
Hello, everyone. That was good. Well done.
The audience hasn't looked, Craig, just so you're aware.
The audience is listening to me. Be careful what I say. Good. Well done. That was good. That was very good. Impressive. Scary, but there you are. We're done. Are you all okay? Is everybody okay? Shell shocked.
I think it's put me off watching Modern Family for life.
Modern Family, why?
All of these characters are named after.
They're all from.
Oh, is that true, Philip?
From a TV program, yeah. I never want to see it again.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I figured that.
Oh, Cameron! Oh God, I did not put those things together. Fantastic. Where did you was it Ryan, did you have the 16 years their relationship had been going on for 16 years? Is that you've assumed that they're still going, that it went on, that it just carried on? Do we know that it carried on?
Well, I mean, if she still wants to leave and go and live with her partner, I think you're pretty safe.
Do we know that her partner's still there? Is still around?
I don't think it says, no.
No, we just don't know. Yeah, I did wonder if, because it was up to a point we knew, but then I thought we didn't know anymore. Philip, do you have a view as you wrote it? Are they still together?
Yeah, I think she wants to live with her partner. That's why she wants.
Oh, that's right. That's why she wants out.
Interest.
Oh yes, that's why because that's right. She wants to move out. Oh yeah, so she is still with her. Yeah, you see that I get confused. There are so many facts.
But that is a little bit confusing because Claire and Gloria are like stepsisters in Modern Family, or
Yeah.
or is Gloria her stepmother?
You
I
differ.
think.
Yeah,
Gloria is her stepmother. Claire is her Claire is Claire's stepmother. That's right.
And Claire's,
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's just perversity. Would you stop with that? I had not put any of this together with Modern Family. It had never gone through my head that this was Modern Family. Shows you how much attention I was paying. And I am a religious watcher of Modern Family. There we go. Tristan, I like the way you're hiding. Is that because of the YouTube audience? Oh, has Tristan gone to? No, he must be here. Oh, he's gone to make coffee. No, he's here. I'm kind of tempted. I'm tempted to ask you what you think is going to happen next. What are the judges going to do?
Like in terms of legally speaking, who's going to win?
So I'm going to get you guys to vote on who should win. But I don't think we should do this with an audience. I feel this is really weird because I normally have these conversations without an audience. I feel I'm limited, I'm restricted.
It was very odd preparing a moot so far in advance. Usually it's quite
Yeah, exactly.
As in having to submit the bundles and the skeletons so
yeah,
far
a whole
in
week
advance.
before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jane says Jane Lambert has just sent a message to say, well done, everyone. Especially because the judges were horrible, not horrible, but hard, she says. And she also only got, well, she got the Modern Family reference towards the end. I only just got it. Well, I only got it because you told me.
I'd also like to say that we staged the problem with the problem question today, but that may be somewhat of a lie.
You did what with the problem question today? I didn't get what Tom said. Is Tom frozen? Is it just me?
No, it's frozen. Yeah.
I'd like to give them a wobble. I'll just say.
Oh, you mean a little bit? Yeah. So you get to prepare a whole week early, but then we give you a wobble on the last day.
Yeah.
Something to throw you off your game, as it were.
How did other people read it? Because I read it as in that
Did anybody else notice it? Did anybody else notice the date problem? And Sarab, how did you read it?
Well, I emailed Philip to ask about it, and I just didn't get a response. So I just assumed.
Philip, you're now we're on YouTube with that information.
Oh no, I'm sure. To be fair, I'm sure he gets like a lot of emails.
Thousands and thousands, I'm sure. If he's anything like me. But oh right. So somebody did ask the question. And Marco, you never thought to ask, you just left it.
Well, I didn't think there was a question to ask.
Yeah.
I was just confused because I wanted to know whether he was continuing his architect business when he moved into Freeman Drive, because then I was just going to say that in terms of raising Lily, if you are working long hours as an architect, then you probably don't have a lot of time to take care of her, and then the caring for her would fall to Gloria.
Yeah, I mean, I think Philip's intention was probably that the building of the office followed the inheritance. Is that right? Sorry, not the building of, the using of. So either of them using the office followed the inheritance.
Yeah, but it's interesting that a lot of you assumed that Cameron and Mitchell were in a relationship. But
I don't know where you got that from. It explicitly says they're not.
I never assumed
that. First line.
I never assumed that, because if there's one thing I've learned about mooting is don't
assume facts.
It's just what is on the facts, stick to that. No more than that.
Right, in the first paragraph, it just says that they're friends. There's never any hint that they're anything else. That's right, isn't it, Philip? That's right.
Yeah, well, it's a bit ambiguous, but that at the start they're just friends. That's for sure.
Very modern. That's what they're interested in.
I just had is Mitchell the artist? I just had him as an artist and therefore incapable of having a relationship.
Wow.
Sorry, that's obviously not what I meant. What I think. But it did seem to me that you had him distracted from any kind of relationship. He did seem to be focused on art and not really doing anything else.
I thought it would just be a bit complicated if you started.
Oh, look, they're back. We better be quiet.
Unmute. David, unmute yourself.
I've done it. You see, that was my laptop doing what it felt like doing.
Good.
I didn't ask it to mute itself. It just did it.
Can not everyone now unmute themselves?
Well, it just means if they have a massive sneezing attack, we all have to hear
Well,
it.
if we earnestly request them not to sneeze, we have a no sneeze undertaking, and then we will unmute you. And if you do sneeze, there'll be consequences. Is that all right?
All right.
Are we
Well,
back?
first of all, I'm going to give a judgment, which will take a few minutes, and then on both parts, and then we're going to announce the winners. Right, there are two issues in every sole name case such as this. First, whether the claimant has any interest in the property at all, and if so, second, as to the nature or quantification of that interest. The first of these questions arises on the appeal by Cameron and the second on the cross appeal by Gloria. We deal first with Cameron's appeal. Does Gloria have any interest in Freeman Drive? The question raised, which is in the context of a family home vested in the sole name of A, Cameron, is as to the effect of a subsequent contribution by B, Gloria, of a significant capital sum to pay for substantial improvements to the property, here £50,000 to pay for the construction of a home office. Whereas here, first, B contributed nothing to the purchase price, and second, nothing was expressly stated or agreed as between A and B at the time of the purchase or later, based on which the court could find that they had any common intention that B should have any interest in the property, does B nevertheless gain an interest in it by virtue of her subsequent capital contribution? If so, then on what recognized and principled basis in law or in equity is this interest founded? It is instructive first to consider what the position would have been if the chronology had been slightly different. If Gloria had received her £50,000 inheritance before the purchase of Freeman Drive in Cameron's name, and if she had contributed it to the purchase price, then the court would have declared a resulting trust in her favour, reflecting the proportionate size of her contribution. That is based on a rebuttable presumption that the individual contributing money to a purchase without his name going onto the legal title would not generally have been intending gratuitously to enrich the legal owner. Does it then matter that the £50,000 contribution came later than the date of the purchase? And if so, why? Not only is it difficult to see a logical reason why it should matter, but there are also indications from highest authority that it should not matter. In Pettit in 1970, Lord Reed said this in connection with a husband's claim to an interest in the matrimonial home which was in the wife's sole name, quote, "If the spouse who owns the property acquiesces in the other making the improvement in circumstances where it is reasonable to suppose that they would have agreed to some right being acquired if they had thought about the legal position, I can see nothing contrary to ordinary legal principles in holding that the spouse who makes the improvement has acquired such a right." In fact, Mr. Pettit's claim failed on the facts in that mostly what he'd done was DIY work, and which was held to be too ephemeral. The later decision of the House of Lords in the sole name case of Rossett in 1991, although restricting contributions to direct payments such as mortgage instalments, was nevertheless predicated on a recognition that the beneficial interest existing underneath the legal interest created at the time of purchase may later change, if such ongoing mortgage payments are, as it turns out, made by the non-owning partner. There, Mrs. Rossett's claim to have an interest also failed, but again it did so on the facts, because although she had done much renovation work herself, she had not contributed financially towards it, nor to the purchase of the property in the first place. Be that as it may, if it be right that financial contributions by way of the payment of mortgage instalments during the time that the house was used as a family home can enable the payer to establish a beneficial interest, then it is difficult to see why a single one-off capital contribution should not be treated in the same way. In Stack against Dowden, a joint names case, Baroness Hale stressed that the inferences to be drawn as to the parties' joint intention may be different as between when a couple are joint owners and when only one of the partners is the owner. But with that caveat, she went on to say this, quote, there may also be reasons to conclude that whatever the parties' intentions at the outset, these have now changed. An example might be where one party has financed or constructed himself an extension or substantial improvement to the property, so that what they have now is significantly different from what they had then. Unquote. These judicial observations tend in favour of supporting an approach whereby financial contributions subsequent to the purchase of the property can enable a court to draw the inference that the parties had or must have had a common intention that the paying party should receive some interest in the property. This is all the more so where it will be remembered that Gloria's contribution of £50,000 was substantial, being 1/3 the size of Cameron's original contribution of £150,000. The imposition of a constructive trust on facts such as these would be closely akin to the application of a proprietary estoppel, whereby if A, Cameron, acquiesces in B, Gloria, paying for the improvement of his property, realizing, as he must have done, first that B was acting to her detriment by so tying up her capital, and two, that she would have thought she was achieving some sort of interest in the property, and yet A never told her that he would treat any such contribution as gratuitous and would deny her an interest in the property, then A is estopped from taking the benefit of B's contribution. An echo of this close similarity between constructive trusts and proprietary estoppel is found in the citation from Lord Reed already mentioned, just as there are many such references to the similarity in the authorities collated by Lord Justice Chadwick in Oxley against Hiscock in 2004. Under each of these two equitable principles, the conscience of the property owner is affixed in one way or the other by reason of his acquiescence in the financial contribution being made to his property by the other party. If it were otherwise, it would be tantamount to saying that B, Gloria, intended to gift her entire inheritance of £50,000 to A, Cameron, something which, absent such evidence, is most unlikely to be so, where the house represented the home and security of both parties and their child. Not only that, but it would be the very opposite of the assumption underpinning the resulting trust, which would have arisen if the contribution had been earlier at the time of the purchase. Accordingly, as regards disputes arising in the domestic context like this one, we hold the law to be as follows, namely, that where B makes a significant gratuitous capital contribution to a family home property in the sole name of A, at a date after A's purchase of the property, and in so doing B acts to his or her detriment, as will almost always be so in cases like this, and where there is no evidence of any agreement or understanding between them as to the intended consequences of the contribution, but A has acquiesced in it taking place, then a constructive trust can and should be imposed over the property, giving B a beneficial interest in it, the quantification of that interest to be determined as a separate issue. We stress that this is not the court imposing on the parties the result which it thinks is fair, although one might add that even the imputation of a common intention is now permissible as a last resort since the decision in Jones against Kernet. It is rather the product of inferring from their conduct that which they must have intended at the material time, the conduct of Gloria being in tying up all of her inheritance of £50,000 in Cameron's property, because it was their joint family home, and the conduct of Cameron being in acquiescing in this contribution being made. It follows from the above that Cameron's appeal from the decision of the Court of Appeal to grant Gloria a beneficial interest in Freeman Drive fails and is dismissed. We deal now with Gloria's cross appeal. Range here is as between half as argued for on behalf of Gloria and nothing as argued for on behalf of Cameron. Given that Gloria has a beneficial interest in Freeman Drive, the second issue is as to its quantification. Whilst there are several ways in which this might be done, we consider that the fairest way is as follows. The equity in Freeman Drive at the time of its purchase in 2002 was £150,000 from the net proceeds of sale of 45 Falmer Road, which had been in Cameron's sole name. A repayment mortgage taken out by Cameron for £350,000 made up Freeman Drive's purchase price, which was £500,000. Leaving aside the question of inflation between 2002 and 2004, about which we have no information, Gloria's contribution of £50,000 therefore represented 1/3 of the value of the equity, being 1/3 of £150,000. So on the face of it, her beneficial interest falls to be quantified at 1/3 of the equity at any given time. We are not persuaded that the court should go further than that and take the holistic view that is urged upon us on Gloria's behalf, if, as we think we are able to determine the common intention arising out of the facts of the case. The current value of the property is now £800,000, with the mortgage still outstanding in the sum of £200,000, giving an equity of £600,000. It can be seen from these figures that Cameron has reduced the mortgage by £150,000 from its original sum of £350,000. From the equity of £600,000, Cameron must therefore be given a credit of £150,000, giving an equity figure of £450,000 as being the figure upon which Gloria's 1/3 interest bites. The current monetary value of her interest is therefore £150,000. To check the fairness of this, Cameron's contribution of £150,000 to the purchase price was 3 times Gloria's contribution of £50,000 to the Home Office. If the award to her is of £150,000 as just calculated, then this leaves the value of Cameron's interest in the property valued at £450,000, being the gross value of the property at £800,000, less the outstanding mortgage of £200,000, less £150,000 to pay off Gloria's interest. Hence, quantifying Gloria's interest at £150,000 leaves her with 1/3 of the amount which Cameron is left with, £450,000, being the proportion that her contribution bore to his contribution. We regard this as the fair and appropriate outcome and the one which represents their common intention as imputed. Accordingly, we quantify the interest of Gloria in that sum of £150,000, and we allow her appeal against the Court of Appeal's quantification accordingly. We leave it to the parties to consider what further directions may be necessary to give effect to this outcome. The matter to be restored to the Chancery Division of the High Court if agreement as to the way forward has not been reached within the next 3 months. That concludes the judgment. Now, turning to the much more important question, which is the outcome of the moot. And the first thing that Mr. Dumar and I want to say is how very well you all argued your respective cases. Very well. And you'd obviously taken a lot of time, and you were well read on the cases, which are not easy. This is not an easy area of law at all, but you all had a good grip of it, and with 1 or 2 minor exceptions, appeared to know exactly what you were talking about. And I'm not going to go into individuals as to anyone who might not have. So this is very impressionistic, although, it is difficult to choose between the 4 of you, but we both came out with unanimous views as to who the winning participants were. And I shall therefore announce that they were Mr. Abul Zayman and Mr. Bala. I think we are now functus officio.
Thank you, Your Lordships.
But well done, all of you.
Absolutely.
And thank you very much, David and Alexander. That was excellent. And well done, Marco and Sarab, and well done, Archie and Ryan as well. Good.
I must say that one of you did introduce a new character into the law, which amused me, and I think both of us, when you had as the heading of your skeleton argument, I think it's Mr. Abel Simon and Mr. Taraskas, you had somebody called a cross-respondent. Now, many of the people who were litigants in my court were very cross people, but you don't actually have a cross-respondent. You have an appellant and a respondent to the appeal, and you have a cross. You may have a cross appellant and a respondent to the cross appeal, but for some reason we don't call them cross respondents. But
that may have been me. Sorry, David.
It was a very amusing idea. I mean, in my court, everybody was cross.
I think we should introduce the cross respondent.
Yes, he'd be a new.
Well, to be fair, and the cross appellant.
Yeah, it'd be like the officious bystander. You know, one of these legal fictions.
Yeah.
Good. Well.
Thank you very, very much.
Move forward into the weekend then.
Absolutely. That ends the thing. Unfortunately, we're not in a room and therefore we can't have a drink and wander about aimlessly. I will hover about. I suspect Philip and I will both hover about if anybody wants to speak to us on your way out. Otherwise, we shall see you all soon.
We don't mind hovering. If anybody wants to ask or complain or say we interrupted too much or were too beastly, the thing about it is it's a fine balance judging these moots, because you do need to test what you're hearing. It's no good just sitting there and letting the mooter just go through the motions. You have to be proactive and interfering, but equally, you know you're being annoying, and you don't want to use up too much of the unfortunate mooter's time when he's itching to get on to some other point. So it's a difficult balance.
I'm afraid it is inevitable. We're in trying to pick up a point to test the mooter's understanding of the point. We may ourselves have been rather long-winded, and therefore cut, perhaps me particularly, and they've cut back on your time for putting your case adequately. If so, sorry.
Can I just say to the two judges, I think the two of you are delightful compared to me. So I think these people have all experienced work.
Oh, I see your students are nodding their agreement, Craig.
Yeah, well, I have apparently they think I'm awful.
Really?
When I'm judging, I'm horrible, apparently.
Well, I watched a moot the other day that UCL were having, which was judged by Brenda Hale, which was quite interesting. Interesting to see how she did it, and she was quite an interrupter.
Yeah. I don't give them time to speak. I'm often accused of not giving them time to speak.
Well, that, Craig, maybe not just in moots.
No, I think that may be universal. I missed a mooting meeting this week, and apparently it went off in 5 minutes. Normally it would take an hour and a half.
Well, there you are. There's a message to be had there. But did anybody want to ask us anything anything you like? How many pets have I got? You name it.
Nothing.
Okay, everybody.
And ask David about the insulting things he says about the people who appear before him.
Everybody deliriously happy. Good. All right. Well, shall we leave the meeting?
Right. That's it. Very good.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Alexander.
Very much,
Very good.
Weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Sarab and Marco, well done.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
I don't think it's that there is money coming, and as soon as I know how it's coming, I'll let you know. Actually, to be fair, the others will get. Everybody gets money. Everybody in the final gets money.